Growing up, I had a lot of nostalgia for my favorite superhero, Spider-Man. Honestly, I wouldn't call myself too much of a Spider-Man fan anymore. Sure, the character had a huge impact on me when I was a kid, teenager growing up. These days, I must admit that I'm actually more of a casual fan than a hardcore fan like I used to. So after many years of rather quote-unquote mediocre titles for Spider-Man that were not very well received, Shattered Dimensions came out around 2010 and apparently received a little bit more of a positive reception. Points of praise included the level design and being able to control 4 Spider-Man with their own unique abilities and gameplay. However, some criticism included the story being very weak and the camera. A little bit of a personal history I have with this game. I got this game for 2011 of my birthday, and honestly it's one of the 2 Spider-Man games that I've ever played. Along with the other one being Spider-Man 3 for the PS2. Honestly, I actually didn't play this one as much as Spider-Man 3 PS2. So let's dive into the ever so controversial Spider-Man game, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and see if it really is the glimmer of light that most critics seem to say it is, or is it a piece of shit? So the story opens with Mysterio entering into Empire State University to steal an artifact known as the Tablet of Order and Chaos. Spider-Man comes in to stop him. He shatters the tablet in Mysterio's hand, causing them to scatter across this universe as well as 3 other universes. These Spider-Men include Spider-Man War, Ultimate Spider-Man, and Spider-Man 2099. The Spider-Man that we see before us is the Amazing Spider-Man. Together, all 4 Spider-Men need to gather up each of the tablets so that they can restore order across the multiverse and stop Mysterio for good, who has gained new sorcery-like powers. And that's as dense as it gets. Yeah, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions doesn't have the most elaborate plot compared to some other Spider-Man stories. The story was written by Dan Slott, apparently based on my research, which is responsible for Avengers Initiative and the Amazing Spider-Man number 700, which was, like putting bleach into my eye and screaming into the heavens for a Hail Mary, hoping that things would someday be able to improve, even though they wouldn't. Basically my 2020. Yeah, I don't have to go into too much detail in regards to the controversy. However, I must say that even that one had more thought put into it than this one. I mean, there is a little something where Mysterio almost kills Madam Web, which raises the stakes a bit. But other than that, it's just a simple story, and maybe I'm okay with that. Shattered Dimensions at least has enough that it raises the stakes a bit. You're trying to make your way through each of the different Spider-Man dimensions in order to try and restore time and order, not law and order. However, the story barely carries that much presence. I can't help but feel that this is a cobbled together nothing plot. But perhaps they were not trying too hard to appeal to the story of the game, because I must say that I find the fan service of the game to be appealing. Each of the Spider-Man seem to have their own graphical appeal. Amazing Spider-Man looks like the modern 60s style. Ultimate Spider-Man has a watercolor scheme. Feels like it was taken from Spider-Man, the new animated series. Spider-Man Noir has a grittier pencil-drawn shaded look. And 2099 has a techno-style feel It's reminiscent to some of the modern Ratchet and Clank games. However, what's even better is that they have done to each of the villains. Players will get to experience the most of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. Most of them have their own unique touches depending on how the fragment affected them. Electro turns into a god with a bit of a god complex. It was funny. It really was really funny, wasn't it? These just keep getting worse and worse, don't they? Well, what you gonna do? Deadpool managed to split into multiple clones so that there would be somebody for him to laugh at his jokes.
Hey, what's green and makes noise? What? The Incredible Hulk!
Man, I wish there were people out there that laughed at my jokes like that. Shows I really don't have any friends. Honestly, I find it to be a real treat to the fan service of this game, and gives more to the appeal of it compared to the negatives. Gameplay of Shattered Dimensions is mainly that of a beat-em-up style action game. The main selling point that the game tries to point you towards is that you can play as 4 Spider-Men, each with their own unique playstyles. Now, while it is true that these Spider-Men have their own playstyles, sometimes they aren't varied enough. Amazing Spider-Man can use web-based attacks, such as forming a web hammer. Ultimate Spider-Man has a symbiote that causes him to perform tendril attacks. He plays exactly like Amazing, except for he uses rage mode, and which causes him to get really angry and more powerful. 2099 can slow down time and has little sections where you dash towards an enemy, and Noah is probably the most unique in the sense that he can sneak around in the dark and take out opponents using his stealth. With the exception of Noah, all these Spider-Men play the exact same except for a couple touches here and there like the hyper jump sections with 2099. The game also seems to use a repetitive level design structure in which most of them tend to focus too much on chasing down a boss. Fight a boss once as their normal form, then you proceed to the final area, where you fight the boss in their final form with a tablet. However, all this is rendered moot considering that the combat is as cathartic and punchy as ever, even though there are different upgrades to the Spider-Man melee system. Smashing square and beating the crap out of enemies is as visceral as chopping a board in Taekwondo. Different sound effects that occur whenever Spider-Man hits a villain give so much weight to all of his attacks.
Too slow!
There are different upgrades that can have Spider-Man do different moves like disarm an enemy or cause him to do a finishing blow after he launches a finishing web strike. There is hidden depth when it comes to how to alternate between dodging and attacking when fighting groups of enemies, so there is some skill involved instead of mindlessly pressing the square button. However, there are some problems that prevent the game from being truly great. Sometimes the cursor had trouble registering where Spider-Man wanted to web zip towards. Usually whenever Spider-Man wants to get to a particular point, a cursor appears signifying that he wants to web zip towards that area. Sometimes there were several points at once and the game got confused on where Spider-Man wanted to web zip. This was especially apparent with the Electro boss fight, where there were several generator points in the area and Electro only teleported to one. Levels in Shattered Dimensions also tend to be really linear, compared to some of the other Spider-Man games. It had a more open Manhattan area. Shattered Dimensions seems to take a more straightforward approach. Most of the time the level design is intuitive, but it has you doing the same things. Either you are rescuing citizens or destroying some sort of object. This got really annoying during the Deadpool level where you had to destroy all his cameras. There's instances like this, it felt like the game had you doing the same thing over and over again I had to look up a walkthrough to find out some of the cameras. In the Electro level, there are several instances where you need to save people. Why is it in the Ultimate level I felt like the developers got really uncreative with how they were made? Or I guess in the first amazing level, Cravenoff, felt like the level was designed specifically around smashing buttons into their place. I feel like this specific level design is done to keep the player busy. I almost feel that the game never gives the player time to breathe. There always feels like there's something going on. Another thing was that many of the levels lasted too long, up to 30 minutes. If there was one word to describe Shattered Dimensions, it was tiresome. Finally, there are these times within the game where you go into a first-person perspective to give a boss a beating. This doesn't happen for every boss. While Beenox may say that this is their way of rewarding you, segments ruin the pace of the game and have too much of a reliance on quick-time events. Sometimes when you are busy punching with the analog sticks, a swift blow may come where you have time to react while punching. These are irritating because sometimes the timing isn't clear for when you are supposed to dodge. So I guess the gameplay suffers from being too gimmicky for its time. Some of these gimmicks work, but most of the time, I feel like they are so constant and strung together throughout the level, I feel like it interferes with the overall core gameplay. Which brings up the issue of Spider-Man Noir. His gameplay is completely distinct from the other Spider-Man, considering that it has a lot of emphasis on stealth. Overall, the stealth is mainly just press the circle button when you're behind an enemy. There's nothing too skill-based, especially when compared to Splinter Cell or even the Sly Cooper series. It's still doable, but nothing really impressive. Sometimes enemies caught me when I was at a distance, but other than that, it doesn't feel as well thought out as some other stealth-based games. Most of the charm of Shattered Dimensions still comes from the 4 different Spider-Men, each of them being voiced by a voice actor of Spider-Man from different shows. Neil Patrick Harris voices Amazing Spider-Man from Spider-Man the New Animated Series. Christopher Daniel Barnes voices Spider-Man from Spider-Man the Animated Series. Dan Gilvison voiced Spider-Man 2099 from apparently Spider-Man and His Amazing Allies. Yeah, I had to look that one up. Finally, Josh Keaton himself voiced Ultimate Spider-Man. The only shows that I really saw these for are Spectacular Spider-Man, Spider-Man the New Animated Series. Overall, the voice actors make the Spider-Man feel like Spider-Man, and they really provide the protagonists with their own unique feel. Other voice actors include David Kaye from the Ratchet and Clank series, and he does an excellent job on playing as Mysterio, giving him that comedic, laughably evil villain voice. So finally you reach Mysterio after collecting all the tablets, and you prepare for a final showdown. First, you start off as Spider-Man Noir and sneak in the shadows until you get up to him and attack his helmet. And then finally you play as Ultimate Spider-Man and you attack several balls of energy in order to blow up in his face. It's very quick and cathartic and usually adds a lot to the appeal of playing as Ultimate Spider-Man. 2099, you have to fly through rings, and I'm serious, I felt like I died 100 times while I was trying to fly through all of these rings. Finally, you end with Amazing Spider-Man, where you deal the finishing blow to his helmet, and there you have it, folks. Boom! After that, all 4 Spider-Men give Mysterio one final beating, 2099 gives the final blow, and then they all go back to their original dimensions, and Stanley explains the ending, and yeah, that's Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions.
Well, being able to play as 4 Spider-Man was a very inventive experience. I couldn't help but feel that I was bogged down by poor level design and ultimately a need to be repetitive in the overall structure of its execution. Don't get me wrong, I actually found this game to be a lot more enjoyable than I remember it being back when I was playing it as a youngster. However, I couldn't quite say that I quite recommend it, considering that some of its problems really do prevent it from being truly great. Well, that's all that I have for today, folks. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And bye.